We've got you down for approximately 15 minutes, so if you can allow some time for members to ask questions, that'd be much appreciated. So warm welcomes, Mr. Smale, the time is now yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for this opportunity today. My name is Nick Smale, and I'm representing the West Auckland Licensing Trusts Action Group. We're a community group formed in 2018 to advocate for competition in the West Auckland alcohol market. We're not affiliated with any political groups or any political parties or commercial interests. In last year's elections, we had 6 candidates standing for the licensing trusts. 2 were elected and the other 4, myself included, missed out by margins of between 100 and 560 votes. In our written submission, we talk about a few different things, bringing a focus today just on one issue, and that's the influence of the licensing trusts themselves over their own elections and referendums, bearing in mind that their referendums are also governed by the Local Electoral Act. We submit that through their advocacy, licensing trusts can and do influence elections and referendums. With referendums, their influence is explicit and open, whereas with elections, so with referendums, it's intentional and open, whereas with elections, their influence is less explicit, but perhaps consequently more problematic. I'm going to talk through today a couple of examples that demonstrate this influence. To start, though, I want to recognise that this isn't a straightforward issue. Licensing trusts operate bars and bottle stores, and they should be able to promote those businesses freely, including during the pre-election period. They should also be free to communicate with their community. It's a matter of judgment whether any communication is okay, whether it steps over a line such that it's likely to influence voters in a way that will undermine the fairness of an election. In our opinion, the West Auckland Licensing Trust very clearly stepped over that line in the elections last year, and no doubt they will argue that that is not the case. Now, whether you share our opinion or their opinion is neither here nor there. We're not here to investigate the specifics of what happened in West Auckland so much as to look at the laws and whether they're adequate. So what I'd like you to think about as I go through this, and the circumstances I'm describing, what controls apply to licensing trusts? Are there any rules to limit their influence? And if so, who would receive the complaint and investigate? We submit that there are effectively no formal rules, let alone anyone to complain to or investigate. Our group are perhaps in an unusual position. The primary goal of the group is to trigger and win a competition poll, which would result in the removal of the licensing trust monopoly. We don't see ourselves as being in opposition to the licensing trusts. We want them to be different and better. We don't want them to disappear. It is clear, though, that the licensing trusts believe they have a legitimate role, perhaps even an obligation to protect their monopoly. And because of this, they view us as their opposition. We've provided a number of examples in our written submission which I think demonstrate this dynamic, and these include the CEO of the trust or the former CEO of the trust writing an opinion piece in the spin-off entitled "The Case Against Abolishing West Auckland's Alcohol Monopoly." In internal communications, the trusts have described our group as anti-trusts. And in submissions made to the Advertising Standards Authority just weeks ahead of the election, the trusts explicitly argued that I was their competitor. Their submission said, "Mr. Smale is a competitor and advertiser because his electioneering platform is to seek an alternative model for licensing in the west of Auckland." If we look further back to West Auckland's only previous competition poll in 2003, the trust spent at least $1.3 million fighting to keep them. Without doubt, the trusts have a position on the competition versus monopoly issue, and they use their resources to advocate for the continuance of the monopoly. We submit that in an election, we have a set of candidates who are pro-monopoly, and you have a set of candidates that are pro-competition, that the trust's advertising, persuading the public that the monopoly is a good thing, is likely to influence voters. Okay. Importantly, though, their influence is not limited to the topic of monopoly versus competition. There are many other topics which are politically relevant, where the trusts have actively sought to influence public opinion and therefore potentially voters. The example I'll discuss today is the amount of profit that the trusts choose to distribute and the amount they retain for reinvestment. This is an issue we campaigned on and remains relevant regardless of whether there is competition or monopoly. To give you context, our licensing trusts have a future benefaction strategy, which is to build a portfolio of property and equity investments to a value of over $220 million by the year 2030. That would be an increase in their net worth of well over $100 million from their current position, and means that they are planning to direct more than $100 million of profit over the next 10 years in property, rather than to distribute it through grants, for example. Now, the merits of that strategy are clearly debatable. You could describe it as prudent investment, but you could equally describe it as empire building. And it's something that's valid for candidates to talk about in the lead up to an election. And thus, given the political relevance of the topic, what I would expect to see from a licensing trust is impartial, unbiased information to inform voters. But what we actually saw was a substantial amount of marketing from the trusts, particularly during the pre-election period, which promoted their reinvestment plan and downplayed the amount of profit that had been squirreled away. Their communications championed a figure of 47% given back, which was actually a forecast for 2020 rather than a historical result, and was cherry-picked to give voters a certain impression. 47% may not seem particularly high, but it is substantially higher than the 14% or so that we estimate they have actually distributed over the last 6 years. We have to estimate those figures because the trusts have never published them. Now, the trust communication on this topic was clearly biased to the extent that the Advertising Standards Authority upheld my complaint that one of their publications on the topic was misleading. So again, we have an election where there is a set of candidates who endorse this future benefaction strategy, and we have a set of candidates who oppose it. And we also have advertising from the trusts, which is demonstrably not impartial, clearly designed to increase public support for that strategy. Again, I think it is difficult to argue that the trusts are not influencing elections. Now, in more general terms, I guess, the trusts actively work to influence public opinion, and not just in the lead up to an election. They seek to increase their favourability, which is one of their key performance metrics. They regularly measure this through market research conducted at least annually. That market research includes political questions. For example, asking how people would vote in a referendum were it to be held tomorrow, and whether or not they've signed our petition. The trusts have publicly acknowledged their focus on favourability, claiming that they target customer favourability. However, in reality, it is voters that they target, with their internally stated goal to achieve poll-winning favourability. To achieve this goal, the trusts attempt to present themselves in a positive light at all times, and in doing so, they have lost any semblance of impartiality. They also spend significant amounts of money promoting their charitable activities, promotional spend that delivers no benefit to the community. We believe the public resources of the trusts are being explicitly used for political purposes, specifically to increase their favourability amongst voters to protect their monopoly. And we think this is a problem not only for elections, but particularly during elections. They have lost their impartiality in their efforts to present themselves favourably, and they are effectively acting as a promotional agency for the performance and ideas of the incumbent elected members. We also believe there was a considerable increase in their activity in the months leading up to last year's election. For example, in the 4 months, July to October last year, the trusts made 240 posts to Facebook. In the 4 months prior to that, that's March to June, there were only 48 posts. That is a 5-fold increase in activity. In the 4 months after the election, which included the busy Christmas trading period, there were 157 posts. Their Facebook activity peaked in the same month as the election. And as I said at the start, the trust will present next, and they will no doubt submit that everything is okay. And the point today isn't to pass judgment about what happened in West Auckland. Instead, think in these circumstances, what controls actually apply to licensing trusts? And are there any rules to limit their influence? And if so, who would you complain to and would investigate? Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smale. I was just going to give you a signal that 10 minutes was up.
Okay, sorry.
But I'm going to open questions to the members. I've got a question here from Dr. Smith.
A quick question.
Sure.
You referred to the huge increase in the number of Facebook posts during the period of the elections for the licensing trust.
Yep.
Were those sponsored posts?
The counts themselves are not. They're just posts to their page, but we don't have the figures for. We can't see the spend and behind the sponsored posts and how much that is done. We'd love to request that information from the trust, but at the moment,
request of the trust.
Yeah.
Mr. Smale, just my question, just context-wise, what was the number of participants in the actual elections of the liquor licensing trust?
Candidates or?
No, percentage-wise of eligible voters, how many participated?
Oh, how many voted? The turnout rates and
Yes,
stuff?
turnout rate.
So off the top of my head, it's in the submission there, but I think across Auckland, it was about 35% for the overall local body elections. Quite a few voters don't tick the licensing trust box, or if they've got an option to tick 3 names, they'll just tick 1 or so on. So the actual ticks out of as a percentage of the maximum ticks is about 26%. And if you include the 15 or so percent, or 15 to 20% of people who aren't enrolled, so of people that could be enrolled, that number drops down to about 22%. So of eligible voters, 22% of votes were cast. Very low
22%.
number.
Did you have a
Yeah,
supplement, Simon?
is this the only, I'm just trying to remember what other ones there are other than this Portage one.
Yeah, so there's Portage and Waitakere in West Auckland. They hold their monopolies. Invercargill and Mataura down in the south also hold their monopolies, and there are a number of non-monopoly licensing trusts.
And what's the best argument for them? Basically, they dish out money to the community.
I think probably not entirely relevant to the inquiry, but the arguments are basically that that they generate profits to distribute to the community, and they also sell alcohol in a responsible way and ensure that we don't see a proliferation of bottle stores.
I mean, do you agree that the basic thing is, I mean, I say this quite a degree of ignorance and probably wind up the Portage Trust behind you, but basically the only reason they're there is from history. If you start again, you just wouldn't do this.
We see that as an anachronism, yeah. But that view is not shared by everyone, obviously.
Mr. O'Connor.
How many, you touched on, how many did stand for the trust, and how many, was there any change in the makeup of the trust following the election?
Yep, all the incumbents certainly didn't win. We had a couple of, we got a couple of people onto, one person onto each board, and there were others that turned over as well. Yep.
So sorry, so there was a turnover?
There is definitely a turnover, yep. And in terms of number of candidates, the West Auckland trusts are split into wards. So some wards are well contested, more well contested than others. One ward in particular, the Kelston ward in the Portage Licensing Trust, I think the member there has been elected unopposed since, the trust may be able to get this exactly right, but since 2004, 2007, I think was the last time the good people of Kelston had the chance to vote. Whereas where Linda stands, it's quite busy. I think they had about a dozen candidates looking for 3 spots.
So are both trusts ward systems?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So there are 5 wards in one and 4 in the other.
And so, but slow. So what percentage turned over of the
Of
trustees?
the members, again, they would probably,
Which was of 3 of?
3 of 7, 3 of 10.
3 of 7, 3 of 10. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Any other questions, members? Mrs. Smale, thank you very much for your time and your submission
Yeah,
here. It's
thank
been
you very
very
much,
useful. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Right, I believe we have the Waitakere and Portage Licensing Trust representative. Sorry, I don't have your name here, but I'm sure you'll introduce yourselves.
Linda
Thank you.
Cooper, President of Waitakere Licensing Trust.
Yes,
Pam Nuttall, President of Portage Licensing Trust.
welcome to the Justice Select Committee. You've got 15 minutes.
Thank
I'm
you
just going to
very
turn the
much
time
indeed.
over to you and hear from you. So welcome again.
Well, thank you very much. I'll kick off. My name is Pam Nuttall. I'm the President of the Portage Licensing Trust since the last elections. The previous incumbent has served for a much longer period of time but was not re-elected. My day job is as a senior lecturer at AUT Law School, and so this is my community service, if you like, that I'm an elected member of the trust. We submitted to the review in March 2020, the Portage Licensing Trust. Our review, of course, was confined to actual matters of the election, and we didn't ask to be heard. So our submission today, which is a joint one with the Waitakere Licensing Trust, is in response to the submission that's been made by WALTAG. And we do thank you very much for the opportunity to respond to the issues which were raised in the written WALTAG submission. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be heard and to respond to some of the issues that have been raised. We have refuted the issues that have been raised in detail in the written submissions, and we won't traverse those in any detail now in our oral submissions. We want to speak briefly to 2 points and then to respond to questions which you will obviously have as a result of both the written and oral submissions that you've had from the WALTAG group. So the issue that I want to address is the issue which was referred to in your letter of invitation to come and speak to the committee, which is that of an alleged failure of accountability. Now, for a board which operates under statutory authority, this is, of course, an extremely serious matter as far as we're concerned. And our submission deals with this issue in some detail, particularly from paragraphs 43 through 46. What I would like to do is to just briefly take you through the way in which this issue is raised in the WALTAG submission, and then just to make a couple of comments on it before I pass to Linda Cooper, who will speak to one of the other major issues. So that the WALTAG submission, the written part that we're looking at here is the first issue, which talks about lack of oversight and accountability. And I'd just like to briefly take you through the way in which this is raised, so that if you have access to the WALTAG submission, we're looking here at issue 1. So we've got an issue summary and recommendations. And then under the discussion, we have a couple of paragraphs which refer to an Auditor General's report, which was made on the licensing trusts in 2014. And then we have, in the couple of paragraphs there initially, we have some selective quotes that have been taken from various parts of that report. And then the statement which suggests that our experience with Portage and Waitakere are consistent with these statements. Now, unfortunately, a thorough and proper reading of the report indicates that, yes, the Auditor General did raise serious concerns in 2014, and these were concerns about auditing and about accountability and about governance and about a future strategic planning and about the viability of the businesses. None of these referred to Portage or to Waitakere or to any of the other larger trusts. The Auditor General's report referred entirely to the smaller, mainly provincial struggling trusts, most of whom had lost their rights to the monopoly sale of alcohol in their area and who found it difficult to continue to operate in a business-like fashion. Concern for these trusts has been supported by the licensing trust movement generally, and I'm sure that President Cooper would be able to tell you over a long period of time about the way in which the larger trusts have attempted to support and promote the good governance of these smaller operations. But our concern here is an attempt to make it appear that the Auditor General's comments apply to us. They do not. And so the statement which you asked us to respond to, that we are not meeting our accountability obligations under both the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act and the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, are situated in the context of the criticisms and the concerns that the Auditor General raised in 2014. We wish to point out that we are not in any way associated, and we do not feel that it is a fair representation for WALTAG to make their concerns analogous to those expressed by the Auditor General in 2014. So I suppose the only other comments that I'd like to make in terms of accountability are that in terms of auditing, in terms of our accountability through the financial accounting system, we of course apply GAAP standards to our accountability and Tier 1 international financial accounting standards. Our accounts are thoroughly and properly audited by a large and reputable audit firm, and that all our election returns have been completed and that we comply in every respect with the requirements that we operate under in the statute which controls our operations. I think perhaps I would be happy to respond to any questions that you want to raise, and I'll pass to Linda Cooper to address the other issue.
Thank you, Pam, for those opening statements. We do have a question from Dr. Smith.
Yeah, my question is quite specific to you, Pam, and that is, did the licensing trust spend trust monies during the elections promoting the monopoly or the current trustees?
Prior to these elections, I had been on the trust for a matter of about 11 months because I came on a by-election. So I'm not able to be terribly specific about all the activities of the trust in that period. However, our responsibility, Dr. Smith, is to operate under the statute.
But our question as a Justice Committee
Yes.
I
is
can
to
answer
see,
that.
and the inquiry is to see whether the law is fair. Now, my common sense view would be, if I've got a trust of any sort of body, so for instance, if I was running a local body election and the council, or for that matter, of a government, spends government resources to say, hey, look, your government at the moment is doing a fantastic job, vote for us guys because we're really good, that compromises the fairness of the election.
I can't recall that any advertising of that nature was run during the election, Smith, but
If you had-
Councillor
The
Cooper would-
question I have, you know,
Yeah.
specifically, for instance, on Facebook, the number of posts, was trust money used during the trustee election period for the purposes of promoting the monopoly or the trust?
No.
The Facebook posts
Trustees.
were referring to the trust's operation and reported as they usually do on what the trust is doing at the time. So there was no specific Portage Trust postings. The trust business is run by a commercial board and it runs as a combined operation.
I think, Dr. Smith, to answer that is, there is no advertising naming any trustees. There is no group of trustees that ran on a particular ticket other than Waltag and the Labor
Sure,
team.
but-
But what I'm saying is there's no money, there was no advertising any trustees. All of the advertising is things like, you know, there'll be one of our pubs advertisers on Facebook. They've all got Facebook pages, all our venues,
Sure, but I'm
different
sorry,
stores. But those Facebook
need to be
posts,
specific about the question.
Yeah,
yeah, so what I'm telling you is there will be quite an element of advertising our business. So we've got these sales, which
Sure,
this is
understand that.
happening. And the other part of it is my understanding of the reason that the Facebook posts increased during that time is because we had a community support package going out called the $1 Million Mission. And we actually were changing the time frame of that from the late of the year to bringing it closer so we could get it all done by Christmas. So we had 2 that year.
But the-
And
the
so
question-
what it was, they were advertising, come and apply to $1 Million Mission to get community funding.
Sure.
And that was all that was,
No,
that
but
was
my
why there was
question-
an increased amount, because that finished,
Sure.
the applications finished before the election.
I accept that you may not have directly said, with licensing trust money, vote for these particular trustees. But if a council or a government says, government's doing a great job, why don't you vote for them? Or just doing that
Yeah, well, we don't say
biases the
that.
election.
We don't say
Or if a
that.
council
Yeah.
during a local body election did things that enabled it to use its own money, it provides huge advantages for the incumbents as compared with those that are arguing for
Yeah.
change.
I could argue
So
that
my
for
real
councils
question-
too. Yeah,
Real
I
question,
think
it
you're
may be
right.
that you can
Answer
provide
the
supplementary answers.
Yeah, I'd
is-
like to answer. I mean, I'm happy to answer, and I'm really worried about the time frame that will run out of our
Don't
time.
worry, don't worry.
So I think the thing is, I guess it's a bit like councils too. There's a lot more communication now. And over the last several years, especially from Waltag asking us, you need to communicate more, you need to communicate more. We've had a really strong program of doing that, getting out to our community. And of course, Facebook is now the medium of choice. It reaches a really wide demographic. And so we've been using that for our stores, our giving back, community support programs, all sorts of things. For example, we did quite a bit of advertising around a huge grant to our special care baby unit, Waitakere Hospital, because the DHB couldn't afford it. So we did a lot of stuff around that. Basically, this is
were the-
operational.
Were the Facebook posts that Mr. Smale referred to sponsored, that is funded, or were they?
Well,
you
they
can-
are, but they're from the operation, just like your marketing budget. They're part of a marketing budget.
Sure,
they'll
so they were
advertise-
sponsored, they were sponsored. And then
Well,
the question
yeah.
is, do you accept that there was a significant ramping up in the level of sponsored posts during the period of the trust elections?
Not in terms of, for the purpose of,
No, that's not the question.
no, well, yes, there's those numbers there, but I think they are just completely plucked out of context. So I've given you some context,
I think it would
but I
be
mean, yes,
helpful-
you could say the numbers are higher,
I
obviously,
think it
but
would be
that's the
helpful
first time
for the
I've heard it.
committee. I think it'd be
Yeah.
helpful for the committee to establish the truth, and that's all we're interested in, is for you to provide for the committee the content of the posts and the funding that was spent on them for the 12-month period around the period when the trustee elections occurred, and then we can establish the truth.
Yeah, sure. I guess we'll have
I know,
to.
I don't expect you to do it instantly. I mean,
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I mean, I will have to take
Yes.
advisement on in terms of the content, but I don't know about commercial sensitivity around cost.
The content of the posts would have been the content of operational content,
Yeah.
which is regularly put on Facebook as part of
It's good.
marketing
Provide
of
us,
the buzz
Promotions.
business.
provide
and-
us with the information and we can make a
We
judgment.
can, and I just need to categorically say, nobody said,
Anyway,
nothing was ever said that you should vote for the trust, because it wasn't about, the thing is, an election is not about voting for or against the trust. It's about electing representatives.
I
It's
understand.
different from a referendum.
that's fine. We've got a new
Right,
primary, Greg.
Yes,
Mr.
going back,
O'Connor.
clearly both trusts, and you've already alluded to the fact there's other trusts around the country that are in trouble,
Yeah.
where the Masterton, for example, where they've lost their monopoly.
No, they're not in trouble, but
But,
anyway.
but, you know,
Yep.
just, they're not, perhaps not as, in as good a shape, as you say. should
No,
we say.
you're doing okay.
I think the only
Obviously,
who's profitable
strategically,
ship master.
your success is determined on maintaining a monopoly. Do you see as a legitimate role to promote yourselves remaining a monopoly to the community?
Well, I wouldn't say that's what we've been doing. We've actually just been promoting our business. We're actually a body corporate. We're not a local body. We're a body corporate and we operate under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. And our sole purpose is to sell liquor responsibly in the community, and we may give back profits to the public. So in terms of that, we're fulfilling our role in advertising our products, our venues.
I understand
so-
that, but the question I'm seeing is to maintain, I mean, you're also there, you're both trustees, so you've got obligations around.
Absolutely.
Judiciary obligations around
Exactly.
ensuring the trust remains. So do you see an important part of that to actually convince the voters of, or the community anyway, not the voters, community, that a trust, that the monopoly is a desired outcome?
As I think Mr. Bridges has pointed out, this is an historic anomaly which has arisen from the development from some areas being dry and voting over a period of time and so on. However, the statutory responsibility which we carry is the sale and supply of alcohol in a responsible fashion. And our communities elect us in order that we fulfill that function. And we're very aware of our obligation to carry out that function, which is the function which is laid on us by
But with
statute.
respect, I think you may be just
Yeah.
avoiding the question. Do you see it as your role to actually promote the monopoly?
I think,
Well,
I think
think-
it's more that it's not promoting a monopoly, it's promoting our business, just as any other business does, like Countdown
Can I ask
or,
a
yeah,
very
so
crisp-
that's the issue for us, is
Is
that
it,
in terms of a fiduciary
you
duty,
believe-
to be profitable.
to sup on Gregg's question, do you believe it is appropriate to spend trust money on promoting your liquor monopoly in West Auckland?
Could I respond to that? The way in which the trusts are currently structured and the sale and supply of alcohol under that structure is our statutory responsibility. That's what the Act requires us to do.
Sure,
We
I'm
are not required by the statute to give back to our community, although that is something which we enthusiastically do and adopt. The responsible sale and supply of alcohol
Still
is the
that-
statutory obligation which
I
we
see you
have.
still haven't answered the
Yeah,
question.
I'll happy to answer that. I think when you say promote your monopoly, basically like any business, we have a marketing budget to market our products and services, and that's what we're doing. We're not saying, hey, we're a monopoly, come and buy us. We're going,
Oh, sure.
this is what here's our products and
I'm
services.
not
Come-
saying you're
I
doing
know,
it.
but you,
Do you
I
think
get that.
it would
Yeah,
be
I-
appropriate to spend trust funds to promote and support the ongoing monopoly?
no, because we don't do that. So I think it isn't appropriate to do that.
And that's where we're
Yeah.
going to end it. I
Yeah.
think about that, and we've run out of time. So thank you very much to
Oh.
both of you.
So,
for your-
Madam Chair, I wouldn't mind, sorry, it's just that I'm named specifically in this.
Yep.
And it actually does impugn a little bit my integrity, and I would like to answer that.
Yep.
Because I think that is, I'm unfairly singled out
Okay.
as somebody who keeps getting elected, but there are other people. So I just, if just to
Oh,
quickly
oh.
indulge.
Absolutely.
We've read all your evidence, and if you would
If you
like
want
to
to make a
provide,
statement.
if you would
wanna-
like to provide additional written.
Excuse me.
Hold on.
I'm
Who's the
ruling
chair?
here.
You're not the chairman.
Okay. So I didn't even catch your first name. I
Linda.
apologize.
Linda Cooper, sorry, it's okay. If it's not,
Linda, no, Linda, if I'm allowing you to make a statement here, but we won't take any questions.
no,
from
no,
them.
that's fine. That's
And if you
absolutely
could do it as
fine.
simply as possible, that'd be much
I
appreciated.
do quickly want to say that I feel that we have been sort of questioning on the validity of trust rather than our election conduct. And absolutely categorically deny that we've done anything wrong. And in terms of me, yes, I do spend a lot of money in the election, and $347 of it went to my licensing trust advertising, and the rest went to my council advertising, which is quite common. Only half the amount that is allowable, $60,000 as an Auckland councillor, and I spent 30. And so I feel that I've been unfairly singled out. And also the other thing I want to point out that flawed is that it said that people with more money and stood for more offices had more chance of getting in. If you look at the graph provided in Waltag's thing, it actually shows right along the graph, right to people spending money, people were elected. And so that has no relevance. It's about building up your reputation, doing the hard work in the community, not how much money you spend. So I just wanted to say that, and we really appreciate the opportunity to respond.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much, Linda and Pam, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we have the Titahi Bay Residents Association Incorporated? Please come to the table, gentlemen. Again, I don't have your two names, but welcome to the Justice Select Committee.
Try and treat you with more respect.
Madam Chair, we had some something to circulate in support of.
Just hand it to the secretaries there, the clerks, they'll distribute them. So welcome to the Justice Select Committee. Gentlemen, you might want to introduce yourself before I shortly hand it over to you. Thank you for your written submission. Please consider it read. We've got 10 minutes allotted for this time to hear your evidence, and if you could leave some questions at the end would be much appreciated. So without further ado, warm welcome to the Justice Select Committee. The time is now yours.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name's Graham Ebbett. I'm the chairman of the Titahi Bay Residents Association and have been for the last 25 years. David Stanley here is the deputy chair. Our organisation as a residents association is apolitical. Personally, I've never been a member of a political party. David has been a Porora City Council councillor for 12 years, representing the Eastern Ward in Porirua. I've stood for approximately, I've almost lost count, but approximately about 6 times in the last 30 years for local body elections in Porirua. And after experience the first time, I've stood after that probably to support other independent candidates mostly and to advance some of the local issues. So we're taking our submission as read, aren't we? I'd just like to, if I may, make a correction to, and it involves an explanation, but seeking some clarification on our part 2, clause 6, the alleged false failed declarations and donations. Some candidates received electoral roll circulated, which would have cost them something like $498 or something. Our contention is that the endorsements that these letters that you see as samples, candidate endorsements and advising electors how to vote, were in fact donations, and that they should have been aggregated with the amount, and it would have taken them over the $1,500 threshold, and they would have had to declare the immense donations. The result, eventually we did get a police investigation, and the result of it was that the police decided that the conclusion was that the electoral roll access was a donation, but endorsement letters and it were not. So there was no offence committed as far as they were concerned. Moving on, really, you see our history and our whole line of evidence and contentions. Our conclusion is that we need to get back to the basics of free and fair election, a secret vote without interference. Simplify the voting, better secure the system from interference and corruption, and reduce the opportunity, and especially over this business of the 3 week of postal voting, etc. Provide a better system of monitoring and enforcement, and require immediate accountability when things go wrong. Our resultant recommendation is that the 2 electoral acts be rewritten and integrated together. They're a mess, and that the rewrite should resolve the matters, the sort of matters that we've raised in our submission. That the Electoral Commission be upgraded, empowered and fully resourced to be the sole administrator of the resultant electoral law, its monitoring and enforcement, with of course police backup. That postal voting, early voting and progressive processing be abolished in favour of single day polling manually at secure booths, with the normal exceptions, of course, for special votes. Online voting be added later on as it can be secured, the system can be secured, and the Electoral Commission have a code of practice for all election candidates throughout the country, and have a penalty clause of immediate disqualification on presentation of evidence of a serious breach. And it would have to be decided what those serious breaches were. We gave some examples of making a false declaration, for example. That the Electoral Commission have a code of practice for all chief executives throughout the country at election time, and it have a penalty clause of immediate suspension from duties on presentation of evidence of a breach. And any reinstatement be at the discretion of the Electoral Commission following investigation after the election. And the Electoral Act 1993 be reworded to be clear: a candidate may obtain the electronic electoral roll for their own election purposes solely, not for the purposes of election of any other candidate. The report of the Justice Committee that came from the last round, we support it wholeheartedly. We're 100% behind it. We just had a couple of amendments or additions that we've suggested in our submission. And one is that references to political parties should be registered political parties. That major breaches of the electoral law would remain with the police, and we suggest that that be as referred by the Electoral Commission, and that we recommend that the government adopt the first past the post system throughout the country. In the story.
Can I ask just on that, why? Easy or, you know, from your perspective? Why?
Because of the manipulation of the election that occurred in Porirua, is a typical example, and has occurred systematically in a number of the elections I've been. And that is, if you see my handout there, you'll see that at the bottom of it, the endorsements that were made, it was a recommendation to vote candidate number 1 as number 1 for the mayoralty. The other person is number 2.
Mhm.
That had the effect of the number 2 candidate was really, I was going to say no hope, but I don't mean to say that. I mean, of low chance.
You might think that, we wouldn't say.
Of little chance. In effect, they'll put up a straw man with the knowledge, with the clear intention at the end that when it came down to the final rounds of STV voting, that the votes that were hers would go to the number 1 candidate recommended.
Sure.
And the 2 added together would outstrip the sitting mayor that was in the election. And it turned out that in effect, that's exactly what happened, because the margin in the end, I think the last count was like something about 20% difference at the end. The sitting mayor lost by about 6%. So it made a huge difference.
That's fine.
There's no doubt that postal voting and MMP or in our case, STV, make it possible to manipulate an election. When you've got the law that says you must remove all advertising the day before election polling day, whereas an STV postal voting system that's been in place for three weeks and nothing's happened, it makes it very difficult to have a free election. You people are lucky because you take part in a national system that's less manipulable than local body elections. I don't know if it is possible to manipulate it, but it seems to me it's less possible. And so you go into the polling booth, cast your vote on election day, and at the end of the evening, you know whether you're in or out. But with the postal voting, the STV, it's amazing how manipulated it is. And we've spent 6 elections basically in Porirua trying to get the system to work fairly. So we've become known as somewhat complaining. But the thing is, every place we complain to doesn't want to deal with it, particularly the returning officer. And we've tried the police and the Electoral Commission. And our conclusion is that the Electoral Commission has to be tightened up. Now, I know in some countries, the Electoral Commission really controls the elections. And I don't know that I'm advocating that here, but certainly the returning officers should be employed by the Electoral Commission and not by the local council. I think you're not going to object to the CEO interfering in an election if they've got to sign off your payment at the end of the day. I think if the Electoral Commission controlled the returning officers, there'd be a chance of us being able to complain to the Electoral Commission with some certainty of getting a result. It would also mean returning officers are better trained and there's clearer understanding of the law. And certainly, I think in our case in Porirua, the returning officer wasn't up to the job. And when you have the votes going to Auckland to be counted, you've lost the ability for local scrutinising of the electoral roll and election returns, which when I first stood for council was a key part of the game. And that's not a case now. I'd like to congratulate the committee on the report you did on the 2016-2017 election. It was a good report. Graham and I read it and sort of thought, oh golly, these people are on our wavelength. So, I mean, did the same job with this election, and we'll look forward to the result.
Thank you so much. I'm just conscious of the time. We've got a couple of members with questions. Greg, have you got one?
Yeah.
Keep it quick.
Is it the electoral system that you are here to talk about or the result? I mean, clearly you didn't agree with the result of the election.
It was the system. I mean, I think the system's broken. I mean, you just had to read the Dominion yesterday, where 88 people returned their electoral packs to the Electoral Commission, thinking they were voting in the general election in September. And I think the average person is now so confused by what they're doing and what's happening. Get totally bamboozled. And you see, we've got 2 systems operating, the national system and the local system. And I think there's more publicity around a national system than there is about a local system. And in the local system, it's actually more important because it affects things like the roads, the rates, corruption, things like that. And I mean, given the choice of being a parliamentarian or like a city councillor, I take a city councillor every day because you've got more impact on people's daily lives. Whereas you people spend half your time wishing the other side would go away.
Justice Committee accepted.
I'm sure you work very well together.
We do.
Okay, question. Claire has got a question.
So at point 9 of your submission, and you've made a couple of comments to this effect, that complaints to the electoral officer fell on deaf ears, didn't want to know, whatever. What position did that person hold in the council, and what do you mean fell on deaf ears? Did you write to them? Did you get no response? Or did you just get a bland response? What actually happened?
Just
And who was it? Who was the electoral officer?
I'm trying to think the different electoral officers in the last 2 elections.
Right,
But the sort of things that you complain about would be the breaking of the 3-month media neutral period. You get front page article on such and such a candidate or whatever it is, and there's no balancing or of, again, you know, of other candidates having the same opportunity. And then it's a neutral period. You made that complaint to the electoral officer and it's like, oh, well, no, we have no control over the media.
Neutral period referring to sitting people.
Well, they don't have any control over the media, but.
No, but we know that the project was a new project that didn't go through a council committee, and it's suddenly bright new news right at the start of the voting that suddenly there's a new walkway going in, so and so's making comment on it,
And that's provided to the media by the City Council Media Department. And when we complained about it as breaching the media neutral period, nothing happened.
Good, true.
so you're kind of down at a level where that sort of is just regarded as trivia, and you know,
So you've listed issues, written them in
Yes,
a letter to them,
absolutely.
and got what sort of response?
A response that, yes, we've received your complaint, and then you get a response back that says, I've spoken to so-and-so, and the chief executive advised that they had nothing to do with it.
I think in that instance, we complained to the chief executive, and then complained about the chief executive, the returning officer. And I think his excuse was she was away at the time, wasn't it?
No, the chief executive wasn't, had spoken to the person, whatever it was, but actually we knew the chief executive was away, so it was somebody standing in as chief executive.
Okay, I'm going to have to draw this part to a close. I'm really sorry. I have appreciated listening to you and obviously reading your submission. So you raised some really important issues, and thank you for the acknowledgement of the work of the Justice Committee in the last election, and we hope to do the same standard in this report. So thank you again.
And thank you for giving us a hearing.
Thank
We
you.
Much appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you.
So we're going to go into closed session, members, before the bell